Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how it looks like there could be a new Donkey Kong Country coming to Nintendo Switch 2. Now, for those who don't quite understand the difference, Donkey Kong Country would be a side-scrolling Donkey Kong game. Think like Donkey Kong Country Returns or Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, those kinds of games. Possibly this would be in the works by Retro Studios, the studio that made those games, those recent Donkey Kong Country games, and also the recently released Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. There is a possibility they are working on a new Donkey Kong game, and it could be coming soon before we see Metroid Prime 5, which, yes, I do believe is also in development here. And there's actually several things to suggest that this is happening. And while I love Donkey Kong Bonanza, big fan of it, and I actually think things are set up for there to be another 3D Donkey Kong game to be in the works. We'll dive into a little bit of that as well. What we're talking about here is a new, exciting 2D Donkey Kong game that I wouldn't be surprised is coming out within the next couple years. So that's what we're getting into this time. Now, before we dive into things, let me just say that I am trying to reach 60,000 subscribers, hopefully soon. So if you do find yourself enjoying my videos and you haven't subscribed already, your subscription would be very much appreciated. But now diving into things here. So some of you may be familiar with fellow YouTuber, content creator, Doctor81. He is known for making a lot of really cool discoveries when it comes to job listings and such. Just a few weeks ago, we talked about how he found one that seems to be suggesting that Retro Studios is indeed working on the next Metroid Prime. Now, we talked about in that video how we just look at comments from Kensuke Tanabe, the Prime series producer who's now retiring, and how he has said in so many different ways he has set things up for the future for the Metroid Prime series, how there's still a story to be told with Sylux, Lila Morn, how the ending of the game is certainly a cliffhanger. So clearly, from a story perspective, from comments from the producer, there is an intent for there to be a future. However, at the time, they could not promise that. Of course, they wouldn't in that scenario, but that's kind of the official information we have. However, we do have this recent job listing that Doctor81 discovered where Retro Studios is hiring for talent that can help out with a emphasis on environmental storytelling, which is the same kind of descriptions we saw in hirings for Metroid Prime 4, or just in general Metroid Prime games, because that's a big element to Metroid Prime games. However, Doctor81 has now discovered another job listing, another hiring by Retro Studios, that is for a concept artist for boss characters. And in here, it says they are looking for someone who has a good understanding of 2D drawing, composition, and modern rendering tools like Maya and Blender. So, do I think this automatically means that Retro Studios is developing a 2D game and not a 3D game? Well, can you not hire a concept artist to make 2D drawings? Because usually, isn't that what concept art usually is? 2D? So I don't necessarily think that this is evidence for a 2D Donkey Kong game and evidence against Retro Studios working on the next Metroid Prime. But maybe it is a little bit of support for Retro Studios going back to the Donkey Kong Country games, which they have worked on before. Now, it's interesting to consider this because, well, we do know about something else Donkey Kong that is coming very soon. So I've pointed this out many times, but we've already seen that both Nintendo and Universal have filed an official copyright for an untitled Donkey Kong Project motion picture. I mean, I feel like that pretty much speaks for itself. That essentially confirms they are making a Donkey Kong movie. And we've known about this for a while. This comes from the official US Copyright Office. But what's also interesting is that about a month or so ago, we talked about how, from some official documentation that came out from Universal Pictures of International Spain, they had a listing for a Nintendo Illumination project to come out April 2028, which, interestingly, April is when we see different Nintendo movies come out. The live-action Zelda movies coming out April this year. We've seen both the Mario Galaxy movies come out close to that time as well. And so this is kind of fitting in line with how Nintendo's been sort of positioning things here. We now have a pattern of Nintendo positioning movies around this time in the year. But what's really interesting here is that right now I'm showing you an image of how it is right now publicly. But when we covered this a month ago, it was listed a little bit differently. A month ago, well, to be more specific, a little bit more than a month ago, April 29th, when I made this video, it was listed as an untitled Illumination Nintendo event film. They took out Nintendo after this information went public. So Nintendo or Universal are trying to hide some information here, but what's become pretty clear is that they are planning a movie in April, and we know a Donkey Kong movie is in the works, and Donkey Kong is pretty vacant in the Mario Galaxy movie. He has a very, very brief cameo. And of course, there are rumors of there being a Donkey Kong movie in the works, but it's pretty clear to me that this April 2028 Nintendo Illumination project is almost certainly Donkey Kong. I mean, clearly Illumination has been the team to bring Donkey Kong to the film, or at least the characters and world in the first Mario movie, and we already know that they will file an official copyright here. They have the Donkey Kong Park expansion, they have the recent Donkey Kong Bonanza, which has been very successful. The strength of the Donkey Kong brand is stronger than it has been in a very long time. And as we've talked about in prior videos, Nintendo does like to do this cross-promotional thing. That's why they put their IPs in the movie. That's why they do different things like the Ocarina of Time Lego set, for example, and how we've talked about how different things like this are hints to other things to come in the future. They like to build these different things up. And so my main point here is Donkey Kong Bonanza is not the end of all this Donkey Kong pushing. It's just the beginning. There's going to be more. They're going to continue to do this. They're going to continue to build up this IP. And so another movie, very clearly, we already understand, is in the works. But I also think that comes with the implication that there will also be another game. Now, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but of course, there's a new 3D Mario in the works. It's believed we'll see that in 2027. We thought we might see it this year, but it looks like we're getting the Ocarina of Time remake instead. But the implication of Nintendo working on Mario now would mean that the team that made Donkey Kong Bonanza actually was kind of its own separate effort, which, you know, we heard about a 3D Donkey Kong project years ago that was spun off from the Mario Odyssey team, a younger version of the team, to make this, and based off the credits of Donkey Kong Bonanza, that's been pretty much entirely proven. There are members of the Mario team that were not involved with Bonanza. We don't know what they're working on, although we're pretty sure it's the next 3D Mario. Main point being here, it looks like Nintendo actually created a new team to make Donkey Kong moving forward, 3D Donkey Kong. And so that's very exciting, because that means Donkey Kong Bonanza is just the beginning. It's very successful. I would not be surprised if we see another one in a few years. But do I think we'll see it so soon that it'll come out alongside this movie? No. What I think makes more sense is to go back to 2D Donkey Kong, which has also proven to be quite popular, and so I do think it makes sense to position a 2D Donkey Kong game, a Donkey Kong Country game, relatively close to the release of this Donkey Kong movie in 2028. And so when considering this, and then taking a look at this hiring post from Retro Studios, could this be a little bit of a hint that they are working on a new Donkey Kong Country game? I think it makes a lot of sense to think that Retro Studios could take a break from Metroid and make another Donkey Kong Country. The Donkey Kong Country games are actually the most successful games we have seen from Retro Studios. They still have a lot of that talent. They did put out Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze on the Switch, and they also recently put out Donkey Kong Country Returns HD as well. And so my point here is that they've kept the Country series relevant, and I think that's actually really important to consider here. They haven't moved on from the Country series, and like Mario, like Zelda, like Metroid, I firmly believe that they want to keep both going, both 2D and 3D. 2D has actually had a lot more success than 3D, not to mention they're cheaper to make, so it just kind of makes sense to have this also going, and they could definitely follow up in a relatively short time a new Country game in time for the movie. A new 3D Donkey Kong game realistically wouldn't be ready in time for the next Donkey Kong movie, but when considering Nintendo's cross-promotional strategies and how they like to have at least some kind of game come out within close proximity of that movie so it's relevant to boost the brand and have it kind of go both ways, get people excited to go watch the movie and then have people watch the movie or get excited to go play the game, I think they are going to position a Country game around this time of the movie. And Retro Studios, obviously, considering their history, considering even this recent hiring post, it's a pretty solid bet to think that they are working on a new Donkey Kong Country game. And yeah, it coming out in the next couple years, I think is actually a pretty reasonable expectation. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.